Welcome back, dear listeners. Today we will talk about another little epiphany that you've had during lunch
Mm.
the other day.
Yeah, it was a pattern around confrontation. And I had reflected on a time in my recent life where there was a person in my life that carried similar characteristics and even slightly looks to the same as my father. And I recognized the pattern early on of within that connection of representation and how this my father was showing up in the version of this person. And so even though they were two completely different people, there was things that I recognized in this person that I recognized within my father. And in the beginning of that connection, there was a somewhat desire to feel love from this person because in the beginning what I received from them and what they were genuinely sharing was very warm and very caring. And it was interesting to see, okay, well, this is a representation somewhat of my father, and I'm receiving things that I never received from him. So the beginning was very beautiful and things like that. But as time went on, there was also a particular pattern that this individual had that was the same as my father. And it was quite interesting because time has gone on, and when we're sitting there having lunch, I realized around confrontation, and the pattern around confrontation is for me was that growing up in an environment where it was very unfair in terms of the space to protect yourself and stand up for yourself. It was an incredibly unfair advantage that
Unsafe as well.
and unsafe.
Mm.
And so because of that, and because there was alcohol involved, and because it was very unstable and very volatile, there was also an approach that felt like one could never really stand up for themselves. And so I learned early on that confrontation was danger, and that for me it was something that was unavailable because even when you tried to meet it, it was met with very unfair resistance. So what I realized upon reflection was that as I've grown, there was things that I didn't agree with within this connection I spoke about, but I handled it the way that I never could and always wanted to when I was younger. And I realized there was such a deep presence of growth because confrontation shows up in a way of self expression. And if something has been unavailable, a space has been unsafe for you to express and able to speak up for yourself, then this weight can be carried. And so I carried that weight of confrontational discomfort all of my life. And in recent years, I have learned how to become comfortable, but also respectful and grounded and rewrite what confrontation means to me. And I now do it with my communication, I do it with my the approach, and I do it with my integrity. Because as I said, confrontation when I was growing up was very different to that. So I've rewritten how I define confrontation. And I got to reflect back that it was interesting because the behavior pattern that this person carried that correlated with that of my father was that I was resenting this person because of how much I resented my father growing up, how much I resented his double standards, how much I resented the unfair advantage, how much I resented the lack of safety. And to see how I was able to show up for myself and confront this person off of my values and do it in a very respectful way, and also hold myself and be there for myself, was gave me the opportunity, the insight that I was doing something that I never had a chance to do. Because particularly when you're young, you just don't have the capacity, the teachings, the knowledge, the wisdom, the understanding, and or there's always a hierarchy. And so it was really interesting when I was able to step back from all of it, be so grateful for how that person was in my life and what they showed me, and ultimately what they showed that I'd overcome, and how the work that I chose to do on myself around the shame that I was carrying with the relationship I had with my father was because it was never safe. I could never truly speak my mind. There was always put downs. There was always deflection. There was no accountability. There was no winning ever, right? And so when one walks the path of self actualization through self discovery, it is not that tangible. But there's moments like what happened when I was at lunch with you, and they become reminders of how different one approaches things, how stability is created through self expression, because there is a recognition that you as an individual are safe because you are safe within yourself, safe within the truth that you speak. And this comes into a form of agency, meaning you choose who you want in your life and who you don't. You recognize why certain people are in your life. And is that person a representation of somebody else who is also in your life or been in your life? Is there validation, approval that you want from this person, but in fact it's wanting from somebody else? What are the patterns and how far do those patterns go back? So standing in one's own righteousness, not through fear, but through safety that one has created, is a very powerful moment of realization. And I think that it's important to show that gratitude for the people who come into our lives as teachers. And whether that be friendship, relationships, of course, family, parents, and just anybody who shows up as a version of somebody else, or it ignites something within, good or bad, because these are the true teachers. And so it's self nurture that leads to self discovery. And it's a beautiful moment when you realize you are rewriting the pages, but on your terms.
Mm.
And on your terms because you've taken the time to get to know who you are, what you need, and what was never available.
That's really powerful. I also feel like it's very difficult to recognize this, right? Like, because life happens, you meet people, you make connections, one gets into relationships. How does one realize that this connection might be showing you something, or indeed this particular person is reminding you of someone, or showing you that um, someone that you were wanting approval from? Like, of course, in hindsight, you know better all the time, but any suggestion on how to find out while it's happening, or even is there some methods that you're using to check in?
Definitely. It really comes down to behavior. How are you behaving around that person? Questioning with curiosity. Because when you step in with curiosity, you are open to receive. There's no judgment, there's no manipulating. It's simply looking at it for what it is. So when you're curious around your own behavior, around how you are and how you're acting around a person, then you can invite the why question. Like, why is this? Who does that person remind me of? And uh, more often than not, when it comes to emotional needs and validation, approval, we are looking for something that we had never received. So reflect back onto your childhood because these are the developmental years. This is where everything is formed. And so just take a moment to reflect on what you never received within that experience and then see how that pattern is showing up. Because what happens is whether it is a partner, whether it is a friend, whether it is a business colleague, or somebody in the workplace, where we meet resistance is where we're meeting unhealed wounds.
Resistance within ourselves?
Is that there's because for example, say there's a person who comes into the room, you might go, oh, that person's great, lovely, lovely person, and I go, oh no, there's something wrong with that person. I didn't like that person.
I don't trust them.
I don't trust them. So why is it that we've both had two completely different experiences around somebody else's behavior? Because their behavior reminds me of something that I've already experienced. And when you really feel it, it's because that experience in the past has left that impression on you to the point where it is now mirrored, is resurfaced through somebody else. So when we look at our own behavior, see, because a lot of the world, in terms of a human race, look outside of themselves and they look at how other people are acting and what other people are doing and then use that as an excuse or a reason for why something didn't work out. But more often than not, with us and our own behavior, it's what we're not doing that has the answers. Because behind the other side of discomfort is where the answers lie. And that's why a lot of people choose not to walk the path of introspection. And they choose to use comfort as a defensive, avoidant mechanism to separate themselves from that discomfort. So when one is curious around just asking into something, why am I doing this? And what am I not doing? Can open up the opportunity for you to see things that were never received. Because the long path of the journey is about learning to give what we need, particularly emotionally, to ourselves. Because that is self-compassion, that is self-nurture, that is self-recognizing. Because that, if we are constantly looking outside of ourselves for not only the answers, but reassurance, then we are constantly giving our power away, believing that the outside has more say in what we choose within ourselves.
When would you say does curiosity start, and when does it kind of leap into over analyzing and being too self-critical? Because there's the other side of the coin, right, where people are like always looking for the faults or the reasons within themselves first, and then kind of putting themselves down in the meantime or in the process of it. So where would you say is a good in between, or how do we check in?
Mm. Well, once again, if you're a person who has a somewhat negative narrative or a strong inner critic, once again, be curious. Where did that critic come from? Because that narrative, that voice has come from somewhere. And it always comes from an external source. Who does that critic sound like?
Is it like a bully or some teacher
bully?
from back in the days?
Is it a teacher? Is it a parent? And so when one is curious within the reflection of, say, something like the inner critic, they can then trace it back to, well, I was constantly told I was never good enough, or nothing I did was right. There was always can do better, or somebody was always comparing me to somebody else. So within that just small example, ask yourself, what would I have wanted to receive? What emotional needs weren't met? And so turning the negative narrative into a positive one is a way of you just nurturing yourself whilst being curious. Or is somebody, as the example you shared, is somebody making themselves the problem? And is that the pattern? Is it them saying it's always my fault, I can do better? So it's all about awareness. But awareness comes in many different forms. But one, to raise one's awareness has to be open for the level of awareness to raise through curiosity. It's not about having to find a solution. It's not about having like straight away. It's not about having to be hard on yourself. It's about seeing things for what they are. And that's why, because of the way that the human mind works, it is about behavioral patterns. And these patterns are created through conditioning, doing something over and over and over, or something happening to you over and over and over.
Until you believe that it's true.
Until you believe it. And then once you hold that belief within you, your subconscious mind will look for confirmation outside of you to strengthen that belief system, whether it be true or not, positive, negative, whatever it may be. So there's layers. There's always layers. And that's why when somebody walks the path of introspection, it really is just peeling back the layers, just through self-recognizing where something is, where it comes from, but more importantly, how is it showing up? You hear those stories as an example of a person that was bullied in high school, in a school setting, and the voice of that bully is carried through for the rest of their life. We made a joke about it one time, saying like, imagine there's a high school reunion, and then the person who's been bullied and the bully like meet up again, and the person who was bullied was like, do you remember this, this, and this? And the bully was like, sorry, who are you?
So messed up.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so this person's actions, not that I support those actions, but they have left a mark on somebody for their whole life, to the point. But then circling back, this might have changed their whole direction of life because of that narrative in their mind. And then they meet up again, and the person's like, sorry, I don't remember you. So it's like, it's showing the curiosity into, why is this narrative here in the first place? Where did it come from? But also remembering that you're safe now.
And being kind to yourself.
Being kind.
Gentle to
being
yourself.
Compassionate. Because what a lot of people don't realize is the unknown can be a scary place. Stepping out into the world can already be daunting. But if you have a strong negative inner critic or strong negative judgment, not only is it scary stepping out into the world, but if things don't work out the way you hoped, it's also scary returning. returning back to self because of what you might fear.
Because of all these noises and
Because
voices.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, we said it the other day about when you're a kid and whether this happened to people or not, but it's, you know you've already crossed the line. You've already crossed the boundary and you're like, well, I'm going to get in trouble anyway. You know,
Might as well go all the way.
might as well go all the way. And so a lot of people don't ever take that first step to their dreams or whatever they really want to step into because they're actually subconsciously afraid of themselves and afraid of this voice that's going to come through. So not only do they fear that, but they a lot of times never even try because of it.
Beautiful.
Mm.
Let's be kind to ourselves.
Yes. Yes.
Hariomji.
Yum.